Hello, good evening everyone. Welcome back scholars. Am I audible to everybody? Just message in the chat box saying yes or no please. Good evening everyone, good evening. Yes Sahil, what is your question exactly? Yeah, so just type down your question, I'll answer it in a while. Yeah, so we will start. Yes, you've already listened to a class of mine yesterday, but again introducing myself, I am Nikitha and I am your history educator, and I'll be taking classes for standard 11 and 12 for the next couple of months. Yes, so moving into the actual topic, before that, just as a routine, I will tell you all about some of the benefits you can actually avail by subscribing to Unacademy Plus. The first thing is obviously y'all can sit at your homes and listen to the live classes of some of the top educators of India, and y'all will have unlimited access to a range of videos. These can be from various departments and disciplines, and yes, y'all can also take part in regular doubt clearing sessions and also answer writing sessions. Y'all can even take part in practice tests and live test series as well. And as I've told you yesterday, every educator at Unacademy, they make sure that they cover the syllabus in a very exhaustive manner, right? So you don't have to worry about missing out on a particular concept or a theme. And there will be mentorship and also guidance given to you all, along with access to study materials. Yes, with that being said, how can you all actually avail these offers, right? So as you can see on the screen, there are a range of subscriptions. You can subscribe for 6 months, 12, 15, 18 and also 24 months. The longer period of time you subscribe for, the more beneficial it is gonna be for you guys. So I would highly advise to take it for a longer period of time. Yes, apart from Unacademy Plus, Unacademy also has iconic subscriptions where you can actually have one-on-one guidance. You will be given a personal mentor. You can literally approach him or her for anything you need, for any doubts you have. And there are also live doubt solving sessions and weekly reports as well, where you can evaluate your progress in the past couple of weeks. Along with that, you will also have Parent Connect. The mentor can directly come in contact with your parents and report about your progress. And there are also study planners. In the same manner, just like how you can do for Unacademy Plus, for the iconic subscriptions as well, it's the same format: 6 months, 12 months, 15, 18 and 24. Again, y'all can look at the costs of each thing on the screen, and the more beneficial it's going to be for you if you can subscribe for a longer period of time. Yes, so that's the pitch. And yeah, so Sangeeta, actually I will not be taking classes for class 11 from this month itself. This month I'll be teaching only for 12th standard, but from next month, starting from September 1st, I will be taking classes for 11th and 12th, just like the regular timetable. Monday, Wednesday and Friday is for 12th standard, and Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday will be for 11th standard. But for this month, I'll only be taking classes for 12th. Yeah, Sahil, regarding the important themes and concepts, I will make sure if anything important comes up as per the syllabus or the examination, I will make sure I will mark that, I will highlight that, so you don't have to worry about that. Yeah. Cool. So moving on to actual topic for today. I'll just tell you all about where we ended the class yesterday. In the last slides of yesterday, we talked about, like how identifying places of production, right? We've talked about that. So moving on from that, today we're going to continue with strategies for procuring these materials, right? We've been talking about a lot, like a lot of goods are being manufactured, a lot of artifacts are being produced, but in order for them to be manufactured, there definitely needs to be a raw material, right? There needs to be some material, some stone or some metal which is necessary to produce something. So how are people actually, like where are people actually getting these materials from? So that is one basic question we need to ask ourselves. Yes, so some materials like clay or stone, for example, they're very locally available. Like wherever you are in the Indian subcontinent, you will have access to clay and stone. But there are some materials which won't be universally available, right? For example, let's consider a few metals like gold or copper or bronze, right? You won't get them anywhere. You will only get them in specific places. So for that to happen, then there needs to be import and export happening from and to different places. So definitely one can conclude that import and export did happen in the Harappan civilization as well. And how we can figure this out is that we've talked about terracotta models, right, yesterday. In the same manner, if you look at the screen here in the bottom right corner, there is a terracotta toy. So this toy is basically a bullock cart. If you observe very clearly, there are pots on the bullock cart, so which basically tells us that people are taking these pots from one place to another, which means transport is happening, import and export is taking place. So because of these figures, because of these toy models, we can say that import and export is happening. Yeah. So there are two ways in which you can actually procure these materials, right? One is from within the subcontinent, as in you want some materials and that are locally available within India itself, and you can go to different places and find materials from within the subcontinent. Again, within the subcontinent itself, there are two ways you can procure them. First one is by establishing settlements. Let's just consider a small example. Let's say you're in a place X and you need a particular material. Let's consider copper. You need copper, but copper is not available in that place X. Copper is available in place Y. What will you do? Every day, will you put in effort to travel from place X to place Y and procure the material? Or is it better for you to actually go and settle in place Y? Like your house, your livelihood, your family, everything. Is it better for you to go and settle there or move every day from place X to place Y, right? The second one is a very feasible option because it won't consume a lot of your time and energy. So in the same manner, the same technique applies here. People actually went to different places around the Indian subcontinent and settled there in order to procure raw materials. I have mentioned a few places on the, you can see them on the screen. For example, Nageshwar and Balakot, right? So these places have a lot of shells. Like shells are available in large quantities there. So if you want to make anything out of shell, let's say you want to make beads or chains out of shells, right? You can actually go, if your profession is like bead making or shell making, you can go and settle down in this particular place, which is Nageshwar or Balakot, which will make things easier for you in manufacturing things. So in the same manner, there are also other settlements which were established. The one is Shotagai. We've talked about Shotagai yesterday in the context of irrigation. So this is the same place, Shotagai, which is in present day Afghanistan. Here, a famous stone called lapis lazuli. So basically, lapis lazuli is very valuable. It has a lot of worth, and this stone is royal blue in color. So these stones are found in this particular area, Shotagai. So people whoever needed them, they went and settled there. In the same manner, it applies for Lothal as well. Lothal is in present-day Gujarat. There, carnelian beads are found. And southern Rajasthan and northern Gujarat, which is basically the border of present-day Gujarat and Rajasthan, steatite is found in major portions there. We've talked about steatite, how it is used to manufacture so many goods, so many artifacts, right? Steatite is one of the common material you can see during the Indus Valley civilization. And lastly, Rajasthan. We've talked about, we've learned about how Rajasthan is a hub for mineral ores while learning geography, right? So there was a lot of metal and ores available. So if you want metals or if you need metals for your manufacturing, people used to go and settle in Rajasthan. So that is one of the way by establishing settlements in a particular place, that is how you can procure raw materials. That is number one. Please repeat once from terracotta toys. Okay, Sahil, I think it's the before slide, Sahil. Yeah, so basically about the terracotta toys, I was just saying one thing, that we need to have evidence for whatever we are saying. We are telling that import and export was there in the Harappan times as well, but how do you know it is there? Someone might be just saying some random statement, right, that import and export did exist in Harappan civilization as well, but how do we know that? So for that, if we look at these terracotta toy models of bullock carts, you can see clearly in the picture that bullock carts have a lot of pottery on them. They're carrying these pottery from one place to another. So this bullock carts, these terracotta toy models, act as an evidence or a proof to state that import and export did happen in Harappan time. So that is the point I made about terracotta toys. I hope you understood, Sahil. Yes, Harsh, regarding the MCQ series, I am planning to take MCQs and quizzes once every chapter or every 2 chapters are done. I don't think it will be valid enough to take an MCQ test in the middle of a chapter. So once I finish 1 chapter or 2 chapters, I will make sure I will take MCQs and quizzes. Cool. Good, Sahil. Yes, so that we've talked about the first way of procuring raw material. The second way is through expeditions. Basically, expeditions is nothing, to put it in very simple terms, a person or a group of travelers move from one place to another. They get whatever they want and then come back to their own place without settling. In the first case, we saw settlements, people actually permanently residing in a particular area. But now when it comes to expeditions, they go on a temporary basis, they get whatever they want and they come back to their own original place. So that is basically expeditions. Here, everybody must have heard K3 region in Rajasthan, right? Rajasthan has a lot of copper mines, especially the K3 region. So here another community of people were existing. These people did not come under the Harappan civilization or culture. They were totally different from what we are talking about. They were a totally different community. So what Harappan people used to do was, they needed copper because copper was one of the main metal they used to produce goods in Harappan era. So in order to get copper, they went to K3. They exchanged whatever they had. For example, let's consider beads. Like Harappan people gave beads to K3 people, and K3 people in return they gave copper to the Harappan people. So this is a barter system, right? Like exchange is taking place because people definitely need so many things and every time they won't have all those things. So that is the reason exchange or barter is very essential. So in regards to K3, copper was exchanged. In the same manner, when it comes to South India, it has a lot of gold reserves, right? So gold was exchanged with the Harappan people with whatever they returned it for. They bartered the system for. Yeah. So that is from within the subcontinent itself. Any questions? Yeah, Asmita, I was just talking about the MCQs. I'll be taking once the chapter or 2 chapters are over. I'll then take quizzes, not now. Um, yeah, Sahil. It's not just copper. K3 is also famous for other ores as well, but they are not found in large quantities. But when it comes to copper, copper is hugely, like, majorly available in K3. K3 is famous for copper itself. I hope that's clear. Yeah, moving on to the next slide. One is procuring materials from within the Indian subcontinent, right? The next one is actually going outside the Indian subcontinent, making connections with a land which is very distant away from India, and then exchanging materials there. So here we will be looking about about two particular regions. One is Oman, and the other is Mesopotamia. So when it comes to Oman, just like K3 region in Rajasthan, Oman is also famous for a lot of copper mines. A lot of copper ores are available there. Agreed. We can tell that Harappan people did not actually have any contact with copper Oman people, but they just procured copper from K3 people. One can make this argument because it's very simple to arrive at speculations, right? But evidences show clearly that Indian people, in fact, did have contact with the Omani people, because number one, when you actually look at Omani copper and the Harappan artifacts which are made of copper, and when you analyze them with some scientific techniques, you will realize that these artifacts are made of same copper. How is that possible? How can you say that they are the same copper? Because when examined, it became very clear that nickel has been used. A component called nickel was used with copper, and then they were used to make artifacts. So usually anywhere only copper will be used to make artifacts, right? But here nickel have been mixed with copper. For example, let's say the component of copper was 80% and then nickel had a 20% role in it. They were clubbed together and then the products were made of copper. So it's like a diluted form of copper. Because of this evidence we observe in the Omani objects and Harappan objects, we can say that there was contact between Oman and Harappa. Not just that, when actually archaeological work was carried out in the Oman region, which is in present day southeastern Arabian plateau, somewhere there, when archaeologists actually carried out their work, they actually found Harappan jars. So Harappans, one thing about Harappans is they've always used like huge jars which are black in color, and this black color is basically the clay which is of a thick layer surrounded around the jar. We don't know what they use these jars for, probably for some storage activities or they had some other use with it, but irrespective of what its use was, they had these jars in large numbers. These jars were found in the Omani sites, and it is very clear that these jars are from Harappa. So even from this evidence we can say that Omani and Harappan people had contact. So that is how one Omani subject goes. Questions? Yes, Asmita, we did find seals of Harappa in Oman, but along with that, along with seals, even these jars were found in large numbers. Yes, Sahil, if you look at page number 13 of your textbook, you can actually see a map there where it shows the relationship between Harappan civilization and West Asia. When talking about West Asia, we're only looking at Oman and Mesopotamia in particular here, but there is a map on page number 13 of your textbook. Meaning of vessels? Yeah, so vessels are basically containers or utensils where you can store something to store. Those are vessels. Yeah. I hope everybody is clear till here. Next is Mesopotamia, right? One thing to remember here is that people of Mesopotamia, or when you look at Mesopotamian ancient books, you can find one word in those books which is Meluha. You can see on the screen, right? Meluhha. It's Meluha. So Mesopotamian people used to refer to the Indian subcontinent as Meluha. For them, India was Meluha. So this particular term was used in the Mesopotamian texts a lot of times. Their texts mention that, like from Meluha we used to get so many objects, so many materials. Even the list of materials are there on the screen: carnelian, lapis lazuli, copper, gold, and even varieties of wood. All these materials were actually exported to Mesopotamia, and we can actually get to know about this through the Mesopotamian texts. That is one. And just like how the Omani thing happened with the black jars, Harappan seals, weights, dyes, and beads, stuff like these artifacts from the Harappan culture were also found in the Mesopotamian region. So, like, these are basically some of the evidences, to prove our point. What is the point we're trying to prove? That there is definitely a connection between Indian subcontinent and West Asia, Oman and Mesopotamia in particular. So, that is about the distant lands. Yeah, I don't see any questions here. Moving on. So that was one subsection in your textbook. The next subsection talks about seals. We've been talking a lot about seals. We've been using that word a lot of times, right? But what actually are seals? Like what is the use? What are they made of? We'll examine that in this particular slide. So seals, they are made of a lot of materials, be it gold, be it bronze, be it copper, be it steatite, but most of them in large numbers, they are made of steatite. We've talked about how steatite is a very soft material yesterday, right? It is too soft that you can actually powder the steatite. It is that soft. So in that case, it will be very easier to mold it into whatever shape we want. So that is why steatite was used a lot while making these seals. So, but what are the uses of these seals? Why did they make so many seals in so many large numbers, right? Broadly, we can categorize the uses of these seals into three. The first one being commercial purposes. This is not something which we can establish as a fact, but speculations are that they have used these seals as present day currency. Like we have rupees or dollars right now. In the same manner, these seals were used as a currency. They exchanged these seals for something else. So that is the commercial purpose it had. The next is identity markers or amulets. This needs a little bit of explanation, so listen carefully. So basically, when you're trying to transport something from this place to another place, and you are wrapping so many things in a bag or in a container or box, let's say, and when you tie it up finally, there is this seal which is attached to that bag. So when this reaches another person or another city, whoever is receiving this bag will know who is sending it to them. Like who is that person who is sending all these materials or the bag to the receiver, right? So receiver will know who is sending it. So that is like an identity marker. So these seals were used as identity markers because seals sometimes also had the name of the owner engraved on it. So that is how it was used as an identity marker. The third thing is mathematical symbols. Even if you look at some of the pictures on Google, many seals had mathematical symbols on them. So one can roughly speculate that these seals also have been used for educational purposes. So those are broadly the three uses of seals. Questions? Sahil, I did not get your question. Could you please reframe it and type it again? Yeah, Sahil, I was saying the same thing. So basically, in the textbook, it is mentioned that it meant that it had not been tampered with. So when this particular bag is reaching the other person has to know the validity of it. The receiver will get to know, number one, who sent it. Number two, that seal indicates that the items or the bag in itself is not tampered. Like nothing. How do you explain tampered? Like nothing bad happened, like it is just intact. However it is packed, it is just intact. So that is what the line you were referring to basically means. Yeah, so we've talked about the uses of seals, and nextly, seals are usually square in shape, and they had a lot of things engraved on these seals. Mostly, as you can see in the second picture on the screen, there are a lot of seals you can see. Some seals have pictures of elephants, um, tigers, goats, bulls, but not just animals. Y'all can also see some geometrical patterns on these seals, right? So they had n number of shapes and n number of designs engraved onto these seals. So that is the engraving part. And one particular seal which is very famous when we are talking about the Harappan civilization is Pashupati, the seal of Pashupati. You can see the picture right there. It is nothing but a man, or sometimes archaeologists or historians also refer to this as a divine figure. Let's not call it God, but some sort of divine figure. Some call it a man, some call it divine figure, or whatever it is. This particular figure is sitting cross-legged, and it is not just the figure. One important thing to notice is that the figure has a lot of animals surrounding it, right? If you can see on the left side of the seal, you can look at rhinoceros and a buffalo. But if you look at the right side, you can see that there's an elephant and a tiger. So this Pashupati seal is of great importance when talking about Harappan civilization. So this is something about seals you all must know. Just a brief introduction to seals. As you go further, you will learn a lot about them. Yeah, so the next is scripts. Just like how we have a lot of scripts right now, Devanagari script, a lot of other scripts we do have in the present times, right? In the same manner, Harappan people also had scripts. But when we are talking about scripts, we need to understand that we have not deciphered it yet. So deciphered basically means we have not identified what alphabet is what, or we can't read it. The script is just there, but nobody knows what is actually written on. So we haven't deciphered the Harappan script yet. But archaeologists have named this as a Kharoshthi style. Kharoshthi basically means the script is written from right to left. Just like how Urdu is written in the modern times, it is written from right to left, right? How do we know this? When we don't know what is written, how do we know that the script is written from right to left? There is a technique again. If you look at some of the scripts written on seals or written somewhere else, you can realize that the letters to the right side are very widespread and they have nice gaps between each alphabet. But when you look at the alphabets coming towards the left, they're very jam-packed, they're very close to each other, like they're just attached to each other. So basically, you can infer that whoever is engraving the script on a particular object, he or she started engraving from the right, and while moving leftwards, it almost appeared that there was no space to finish the engraving part, and that is why he had to crumple all of it towards the left. So with these one technique, one can conclude that Kharoshthi script is actually written from right to left and not the usual thing we write these days. Yeah. Yeah, so next is how many alphabets does this script have? We have 26 in English, we have around 53, 54 in Hindi and all. But when it comes to Harappan script, it almost had 375 to 400 signs, right? I don't think it is right to call them as alphabets, but let's just address them as signs. Because, and there were so many number, 375 to almost 400 signs. And if you look at a couple of seals, you can see some inscriptions written on it. Usually these are very short because usually the seals are very smaller in size, so only a couple of signs can be engraved on it. And not just on the seals, but the script, if you look at so many artifacts in the Harappan civilization, you all can also see that this particular script have been engraved on copper tools, like various jars, like copper and terracotta tablets, right? Tablets are nothing but plain rectangular or square shaped pieces on which you can write something. That is just a tablet. And even on the jewelry, you can see the scripts of it. And even just like how we have signboards right now, like random signboards we see on streets, just like that, Harappan people also had signboards, and they had this script engraved on the signboards. So what does this basically mean? There is a lot of script written on so many objects, right? What does this indicate? Can one come to a conclusion that literacy was given a lot of importance in those times? Like, was every individual in the Harappan civilization a learnt man? Did he have education? Like questions like these come up to the surface when talking about the script, because script is literally everywhere. You look at anything regarding Harappan civilization, you will definitely see a script on it, which means so many people are using it. Does that mean everybody is educated? Everybody is a literate? Again, this is just a question. We don't have an answer to it. It is just a speculation. So that is something we have to talk about, the script. Questions? Yeah. Weights, right? So next is weights. Weights are usually, initially in the Harappan civilization, weights were spherical in shape with a flat top and base. But as the civilization was progressing, in the later period of time, it is a cubical shape, right? So the shapes changed as the years progressed. Nextly, they conform to the standard Harappan binary weight system. So in while learning maths, everybody must have learned what a binary thing is, right? But nonetheless, I will tell you all a brief introduction about what this binary thing is. I'll just give you an example. They had weights. If a particular weight is of 1 kg, let's imagine, or 1 gram, the next the one which is preceding that will definitely be of 2 kgs or 2 grams. The other one will be of 4. You will not find a 3 kg weight, because that is how there was a standard binary weight system existing in the Harappan civilization, because they had these conformity to the standards. They only had 1 kgs, 2 kgs, 4, and then 8. So like, you understand the pattern, right? So just to give you all a rough idea as to what that actually, what those weights actually meant, the smallest weight was around 0.85 grams, and there were a range of weights as well. But the most common thing you can see is the 13.7 grams one, which is basically the 16th ratio. So here you will understand what the 16th ratio is. It's, if you multiply 0.8 into 16, it is roughly going to give you around 13.7. So this is what I meant by a Harappan binary weight system. I know this concept is a little bit complicated. If anybody still has doubts about it, please ask in the comment section, chat box. I will reply to that. Guys, I can see a lot of comments again today about explanation in Hindi. I have told you all yesterday itself. I don't know to speak Hindi, and I'm really sorry about it. Just bear with me. From now on, my presentations are going to be only in English. The whole of my presentations are going to be only in English and not Hindi. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so that is about the weights. And moving on to the next subsection of the first chapter in your textbook, it's basically ancient authority. When you look at the term authority, what does that one thing which strikes your mind? You know, like you've studied a lot about political science as well, right? Just put your answers in the chat box. When you hear the term authority, what is that one thing which clicks your mind? Authority, something like power, or just put your answers in the chat box. When you listen to the term authority, what is that one thing which strikes your mind? Yes, Ramanujan, you're right there. It basically means the king or some person who rules, some sort of person who is holding power. Exactly, you're correct. Yeah, to give power, cabinet, ruler. Yeah, everybody is right. So that is what basically we mean by authority. So we have prime minister, president, and so many chief ministers for our states. Even in the past times, we had so many kingdoms where there were monarchs or like great emperors and stuff. But in the Harappan civilization, we do not have any evidence as to who actually ruled, or was there a ruler in the first place or not. So for that, we need to just go into the details a little bit. Laying out the context for y'all, we've talked a lot about artifacts, seals, weights, bricks, right? Yesterday also, when we were talking about bricks, I told you one standard ratio for bricks, that the length and breadth of a brick are 4 and 2 times greater than that of the height, right? So there is a particular standardized system being followed throughout all the settlements in Harappan civilization. Not just that, even the weights we talked about, seals we talked about right now, all of them have a very uniform structure. For them to be uniform, is anybody taking decisions? Is somebody in power passing all these laws? You know, like bricks have to be made in this ratio only, seals have to be made in square shape only, or weights have to follow that particular system only. Is anybody making these rules, or people are just following all these rules on their own? Because it is very important to note the uniformity we can observe in all these objects. That is number one. And settlements strategically set up, right? We've talked about how in particular places only settlements are being established. In few places are being left out because they somehow think they are not suitable places for settlements. So when you're thinking about all these things, you must come to a question, like you must think of something, that who is organizing all this? Is there somebody behind who is running the whole of administration, who is dictating rules, who is telling that a particular activity has to happen in this very manner only? Who is dictating? Who is organizing all this? That is the main question, right? So here we have a couple of answers to the question raised here. What is the meaning of uniformity? Sahil, so basically uniformity is nothing but very similar structure observed in all the things. Let's say we're talking about bricks, right? Every brick is the same because every brick has the same height, has the same length and the same breadth. So like the similarity or the similarness is nothing but called uniformity. So that is uniformity. Yeah, Sahil, you're right there. That is one of the speculations, Sahil. Yes, so looking at that, if you look at the archaeological records, I'm pretty sure even if you turn pages and pages of archaeological records, you will not find a definite answer to this. No archaeological record says that there was a king who was ruling Harappan civilization, or no, people were ruling for themselves. Like, you won't have a definite answer even if you look at the archaeological records. But there are only a lot of speculations made again by a lot of archaeologists, because when you look at the ruins of Mohenjo-daro city, there is a huge massive structure in the citadel. We've talked about what citadel is, right, yesterday. Just for your revision, just tell me what citadel is in the chat box. And what is the opposite of citadel we've talked about when talking about the city of Mohenjo-daro yesterday? One is a citadel, and what is the other one we've talked about yesterday? Just quickly type your answers in the chat box, guys. Yeah, so I don't think anybody remembered. But yeah, so basically citadel is the upper platform of the Mohenjo-daro city, and the opposite of it we've talked about is the lower town, where all the common people resided. So yeah, that was just a background to it. Yeah, coming to the speculations of a palace at Mohenjo-daro. If you look at the ruins, you can see that there existed some massive structure, and we really don't know what that massive structure is. It might be something else, or it might be a palace itself. We don't know, but it is just a speculation that something of that huge in size existed. So some people call it a palace, which basically means that if there is a palace, there's supposed to be a king or a queen or a ruler, basically. So some people say that yes, the Harappan civilization actually had a king. And there's also, if you look at the figure here on the screen, it is basically, this figure in itself is called priest king. If anybody have read some textbooks about the Mesopotamia history, there also you will come across this particular term called priest king. So drawing a reference from the Mesopotamian civilization, archaeologists in India, they have also concluded that whatever stone or whatever that object we found in the Harappan civilization, the one you can see on the screen, they have called this also as the priest king. So basically, priest king kind of again is telling us or indicating that yes, there was a figure who was very prominent, who was leading all these activities in the region. So questions. Yeah, Mera Somu Bharat, you are correct. Lower town is the opposite for the citadel. No, Sahil, you can't just come to a conclusion that whatever archaeologists say is true. Sometimes they might be true, sometimes they may not, because whatever evidence we're talking about right now, if you look at it from one perspective, it may sound kind of true. But in the future, another archaeologist may come up and give us a different explanation to it, which can be completely valid. So whenever you're talking about history, and especially when we're talking about history in the prehistoric era, but basically what I mean by prehistoric era is that we don't have a literary evidence. We don't have texts or scripts or manuscripts to actually learn about that particular era. And Harappan civilization is one of that. We do have a lot of script there, but we haven't deciphered it yet. We don't know what is written. So in that case, we only have to rely on the archaeological evidence. But again, whatever archaeologist says might be true, might not be true. That is why what archaeologists do is they do not come to a conclusion all the time. If something they find, they won't say that yes, this is the result of it. They won't be like, this is definitely the answer to the given question. That is why I have been using the word speculations a lot yesterday and today. Speculation basically means, there might be a possibility that this is the answer, but again, on the flip side, something else can also be the answer. So this is just one of the plausible reason. So that is what I meant by speculations. Yeah, archaeology, whatever it says, you don't have to believe that it is true. You can have your own explanations to it, Sahil. yeah, Sahil, it's not necessary that they have to be correct all the time. History of earlier is based on only imagination after going through the evidence. Yes, Somu Bharat, in a sense you are true. It's just about imagination, but that doesn't mean you can completely evade the fact that like a particular historian says that history is a reality once lived. When we think of history, usually we think of like some fictional stuff or some story format, but you also have to understand at the same point that it was a reality, but not now. It was a reality sometime before, and this reality was definitely lived by people. So you just can't say that it is only imagination. It is definitely a reality. But now, when we are talking about that past, we can speculate, and now we can imagine what happened in the past, right? So the period itself is not an imagination. What we are trying to figure that period, so that the process of figuring out is imagination. Yeah, so in a sense, you're correct, Somu Bharat. Yeah. Where was I? Yeah, different opinions, right? After looking at so many, we've talked about a couple of points in this slide and the previous slide, and it's time for us to arrive at conclusions. And these are the 3 points you can see on the screen. These are some of the opinions put forward by various historians. First one is that the Harappan civilization did not have a ruler, and which basically meant that all the people in the kingdom are equal. All of them had a equal status, and there was no ruler. That is one viewpoint, that is one opinion. The second thing, some historians did not agree with that, and they came up with their own opinion. So the second opinion is that there was no single universal ruler, but there existed separate rulers. Which basically meant, I'll just give you an example for this. Let's consider the present day India, right? We have prime minister or the president at the top, and we have chief ministers at the state level. So what this particular set of historians are trying to tell is that there was no primary head who is responsible for all the administrative activities of the region as a whole, but there were heads or there were rulers, but they only looked after specific regions allotted to them. For example, Mohenjo-daro might have had its own ruler. Harappa might have had its own ruler. Lothal might have had its own ruler. But on a whole, the whole of Harappan civilization did not have that one ruler. So that is the second viewpoint or the second opinion. The next one is the existence of a single state and a ruler. Some people said that no, we can definitely say that there existed a ruler, there was a king, there was a monarch. See, the terms might differ, but you'll understand what that is, right? So that is what I was talking about authority in the previous slide. That is why I've asked you all what authority means to you all. Authority doesn't necessarily have to be in the form of a king. It can be some power vested with a power holder. So some historians argue that there existed a ruler or a single king. Why I actually put that particular sentence is in capital letters is that it is very much possible that the third explanation or the third opinion is the right answer to the question asked earlier, that was there a ruler or not. The answer, and it's very much tempting for a historian to say that yes, the third opinion is correct, because again, we've talked about it in the previous slide, right? There is a universality in objects, there is a uniformity in objects. There has to be somebody who is governing all this. Otherwise, it's very impossible for all the people to come at one place and then decide, we'll have this particular system, we will have this particular kind of bricks. It's very difficult for so many people to come together and decide. But if you look on the flip side, if there is a ruler or a king, then it is possible, right? Because only one person is taking a decision. So looking at that, it is very much tempting for a historian to say that there existed a single ruler or a state. So that is about the palaces and kings. Any questions? Yes, Somo, you can call me that. That's not a problem. Sahil, I did not understand your question properly. Could you please rephrase it? Which para 2 are you talking about? I'll get back to that again. Just type in the chat box. Yeah, so the last topic I would like to cover for today is the end of civilization, right? We've been talking a lot about civilization, and it's time for us to talk about how did the civilization come to an end. So we've talked about the timeline yesterday, that all the civilization almost came to an end during the 1900s or the 1800s BCE. Again, we know what Cholistan is. It's a site in Harappan civilization. This site was totally abandoned at around 1800 BCE, and new settlements started growing outside the Harappan phase or Harappan area. Initially, Gujarat, Haryana, or Western Uttar Pradesh, they were not a part of the Harappan civilization. But after 1800 or after 1900, these settlements have been growing, which means that people are moving out of these places and settling somewhere else. And from the same time itself, material culture have been transforming. The one specific thing or a couple of things which are very important while talking about Harappan civilization is the seals, weights, beads, and like the specialization of various crafts. We've talked about a lot in the past 2 days. So all of this material culture have been disappearing slowly, and the way the houses are being built, like we've talked about massive structures being constructed in the city of Mohenjo-daro, for example. Like whatever we've learned till now, there is a change in all this starting from 1900 or 1800 BCE. So everything was changing, and you can actually look at the contrast here. Till now we've talked about great cities, nice urban life, and all that stuff, but from 1800 we see that a rural way of life is emerging. Now people are no more interested in staying in the cities, or new cities are not coming up, or the existing cities are not being developed. There is a new way of life coming up, which is basically rural in nature. If you remember, yesterday we've talked about 3 Harappan phases, right? Like the first slide I've talked about 3 Harappan phases. Just put them in the chat box if you all remember what those phases are. Yes, we've talked about 3 phases yesterday, if you all remember, while we were talking about culture, right? Yeah. So just put them down in the chat box if you remember what those 3 phases are. One is obviously the mature phase we've been talking about till now. But what is that one thing preceding mature phase and the one after the mature phase? Yes, Somu, it is early Harappan and later Harappan cultures. You're right. Good that you remembered. Yeah. Yeah, so there was a rural way of life emerging. Why did I ask you all that question is that the later Harappan, right? So this particular phase after 1900, where the rural way of life is emerging, this is called the late Harappan phase. So just to give you all a demarcation as to what actually separated mature and late, that is why I asked you that question. So this rural way of life is referred to as late Harappan civilization. And just another side bit of information for y'all, Indian subcontinent did not see the rise of cities after 1900 for almost a millennium, which means from 1900 BCE to 900 BCE, for almost 1000 years, India did not experience the rise of new cities. Like that is how rural the way of life was in the Indian subcontinent for those 1000 years. Yeah, that's just a little bit of side information. Yes, we've talked about how there are a lot of changes. Everything is changing. artifacts have been disappearing. But what happened? Like, what is the reason why the change is happening? What brought about these changes, right? So this change, there can be several explanations as to why it is changing. Number one, it can be or broadly you can categorize the whole of it as natural causes, like some natural disasters, like disaster calamities. For example, climatic changes or deforestation is taking place, or there are heavy floods in a particular area. Or sometimes, what happens with the rivers is that the course of the river, for example, it is flowing in this particular X area. Sometimes rivers do change their traces, they do change their tracks. They will stop flowing here and they will create a new track for themselves. So in that manner, it must have submerged the settlements. But again, when you're talking about so many disasters and natural calamities, this can be true to a specific region or a particular region. Let's say Lothal disappeared because of floods, or Kalibangan disappeared because of deforestation, or some other place disappeared because of drying up of rivers. But do you think this is the only sole phenomena which affected the whole of Harappan civilization? Do you think because of these natural calamities the whole civilization came to an end? It is not quite possible, right? It is possible only to a certain extent, but Harappan civilization is very large. It is spread over a very large geographical area. Do you really think because of these natural factors the civilization came to an end? I don't think so. Like, honestly, I don't think so. So for this, we need an alternative explanation to prove the fact, or to kind of support the fact that why did the civilization come to an end. Here the role of state plays an important role. We've talked about state, we've talked about how there was a unifying ruler. If, let's say, that ruler is weak, that ruler is not efficient, and therefore he is not able to carry out the administrative actions in a very efficient manner, so probably because of that there was no universal weight system or universal brick system in existence. Slowly they started disappearing because there was no efficient ruler to organize all such things. So that can be one of the reasons why the civilization came to an end. And the other thing can be like people actually moved out of cities because they did not have a good lifestyle, right? So again, while talking about the end of civilizations, if you all talk about this in detail, there are n number of reasons, n number of explanations given as to why the civilization came to an end. These are just a few I'm mentioning here, which are a part of your textbook syllabus. But as you go forward in your higher standards, you will learn about various reasons and various explanations given by so many historians as to why the civilization came to an end. But for today, just as a part of your syllabus, these are some of the explanations given as to why did the civilization end. Any comments? Please repeat that 1900 BCE once. Yes, Sahil. So basically what I was telling is 1900 is that demarcation mark or that separating year which kind of demarcates mature Harappan phase and later Harappan phase. So till 1900 everything was uniform. There was a uniformity in making beads, making seals, making weights. But once from 1900 all this uniformity started disappearing. Like not just the uniformity, but seals, weights, the objects itself started disappearing. So there has to be some reason for it, right? Like why did that happen? All of a sudden, why only in 1900 this change started taking place? So for that, I was giving the explanations as to it can be either because of natural disasters which happened in 1900, that is why people started moving out of the Harappan civilizations, or it can be the collapse of the state, basically the collapse of the political power. So that is the significance of 1900 here. Yeah. Yeah, Sahil, is this the Mohenjo-daro movie you're referring to? Dam breaking the Harappan city. Yes, again, as I've told you, this can be another possibility. We've talked about floods, right? But if, for example, excessive water, if a dam breaks or if there is excessive floods, it just submerges or destroys the entire settlement. So, which means people are forced to leave that place and go somewhere and settle down, right? So, yes, whatever you're saying is correct. This might be one of the possible reasons. The floods or the breakage of dams might be one of the possible reasons as to why the civilization came to an end. Somu, yes, noted. I've got your name. It's Reshta. Hello. Yeah, so yes, students, that is the topic for today. It's almost been an hour we started this. Yeah, so in the next sessions, we'll be talking about the remaining subsections of this particular chapter. There are still a lot of subsections to go. We will talk about them. And I hope everybody understood whatever happened today. And yes, just moving on to the pitch. I've talked about iconic and plus subscriptions initially, right? So if you all want to ever subscribe to them, you all can use my code, which is TUM10, and avail a 10% off while subscribing to it. Yes, so I hope to see all of you all in the next session. And as your request goes, the MCQs and quizzes, I will definitely take all of them once I finish the chapter or once I finish 2 chapters. I will decide that along with you all tomorrow in the class as to when do you all want a quiz. We will definitely sort that out. And yeah, lastly, if you all are interested in the content, please do make sure you all like the video and subscribe to our channel Unacademy. Thank you so much everyone. Have a good evening everyone. Thank you.